The crystal glass shattered against Italian marble, and every conversation in Lumiere's soul died instantly. Imani Okonkwo stood frozen, her serving tray still extended toward the elderly woman choking at table 12, while the most dangerous man in South Korea rose slowly from his seat directly behind her. She felt his presence before she saw him, felt the temperature drop, felt the collective terror ripple through the dining room like a physical wave. Seo Kong-jun's chair scraped against the floor with deliberate slowness. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough to slice through steel. "You walked past my table." Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. The elderly woman behind her gasped for air, finally dislodging the obstruction from her throat. Servers pressed themselves against walls. Wealthy patrons became statues. The maitre d' looked ready to collapse. But Imani turned around. She turned around and met his eyes. Before we uncover what happened when the most feared man in Seoul was challenged in public, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Imani's position? The dining room of Lumiere Seoul existed as a temple to excess. Hand-blown Murano chandeliers casting amber light across tables dressed in imported Belgian linen, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glittering abyss of Gangnam skyline. Every guest present had net worths exceeding most nations' GDP. Every server had been trained to treat them accordingly. And every single person in that room knew exactly who Seo Kong-jun was. The rumors varied in detail but agreed on essence. He controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. Politicians sought his blessing. Competitors disappeared. His legitimate business empire, real estate, pharmaceuticals, luxury hospitality, served as an elegant mask over something far more dangerous. No one challenged him. No one refused him. Until tonight. Imani stood 5 feet away from him, still holding the tray she'd used to perform an emergency Heimlich maneuver on Mrs. Park, the 73-year-old widow who'd been choking alone at her table while Seo Kong-jun waited for his second bottle of imported wine. She'd seen him signal her. She'd assessed the situation. She'd made her choice. Now she would face the consequences. "I apologize for the delay, sir." Her voice carried no tremor. The guest required immediate medical attention. Seo Kong-jun studied her with an expression she couldn't read. His face might have been carved from granite. Sharp jawline, piercing eyes darker than the Seoul night outside, a stillness that felt predatory rather than passive. The collar of his charcoal brioni suit lay slightly open, revealing the edge of a tattoo that curved along his collarbone. Korean characters, ancient symbols, marks that whispered of legacy and blood. "You chose to assist her." His voice remained terrifyingly soft. "Over-serving me." The accusation hung in crystalline silence. Imani felt the weight of every stare in the room pressing against her spine. She felt her manager, Mr. Cho, silently pleading with her to apologize profusely, to grovel, to save them all from whatever punishment this man might unleash upon the establishment that had dared employ her. She felt fear, yes, but she also felt something stronger. "Yes," Imani said clearly. "I did." A sharp intake of breath somewhere to her left. Someone's utensils clattered against fine china. The silence became suffocating. Seo Kong-jun's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. His right hand rested on the pristine tablecloth, and she noticed the tattoo extending down his wrist, intricate black ink forming patterns she didn't recognize. His fingers were long, elegant, perfectly still. Dangerous hands. Hands that had done things the whispered rumors only hinted at. "You understand," he said slowly, "who I am." It wasn't a question. "I understand that a woman was dying." Imani held his gaze without flinching. "I understand that wine can wait. Life cannot." The words fell into the frozen room like stones into deep water. Imani watched something shift behind Seo Kong-jun's eyes. Flicker. Crack in the marble facade. For one endless moment, she thought she saw surprise. Genuine surprise, before it vanished behind walls of ice. He rose from his chair with the controlled grace of a predator who had decided not to strike. The dining room held its breath. Seo Kong-jun took one step toward her, then another. He stopped close enough that she could smell sandalwood and something darker, ink perhaps or smoke. close enough to destroy her with a word. But instead of speaking to her, he turned. He turned toward Mrs. Park, the elderly woman still trembling in her chair, one hand pressed to her chest as she struggled to recover from her near-death experience. "Are you unwell?" His voice transformed, still quiet but stripped of its earlier edge. "Do you require a physician?" Mrs. Park blinked up at him with watery eyes. I thank you, but..." Seo Kong-jun raised one hand, and his assistant materialized from the shadows near the private dining area. The man received whispered instructions and disappeared. "My personal physician will examine you," Kong-jun informed the elderly woman. "Please remain comfortable until she arrives." Then he reached into his interior pocket, withdrew a black card, and placed it gently beside Mrs. Park's untouched dessert. "Your meal this evening has been covered, along with any medical expenses." Mrs. Park's mouth opened and closed without sound. Seo Kong-jun straightened, adjusted his cuffs with precise movements, and turned back toward Imani. The entire restaurant seemed to lean forward. This was it. This was the moment he would destroy her. Publicly, completely, in whatever devastating manner a man of his power preferred. He had shown mercy to the elderly woman, but that mercy only heightened the anticipation of his cruelty toward the server who had dared to defy him. But Seo Kong-jun simply looked at her. He looked at her as if seeing something he hadn't expected to find in a place like this. "Your name," he said quietly. Imani swallowed once. "Imani Okonkwo." Something flickered in his eyes again. That same strange crack in the ice. "Ms. Okonkwo." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the silent room. "You made the correct choice." The words dropped like a bomb. Imani watched as the color drained from her manager's face. Not from fear this time, but from... She watched as guests exchanged disbelieving glances. She watched as Seo Kong-jun's own men, stationed discreetly near the entrance, failed to conceal their surprise. Imani began. But he was already walking away. His entourage falling into formation around him as he moved toward the private elevator reserved for the restaurant's most elite clientele. At the elevator doors he paused. He looked back over his shoulder. His eyes found hers across the length of the room, and Imani felt the connection like a physical touch. Electric, unsettling, impossible to explain. Then the doors opened, swallowed him, and he was gone. Later that evening, Imani stood in the narrow alley behind Lumiere Seoul, her white blouse untucked, her feet aching inside regulation heels, her hands still trembling hours after they should have stopped. Rain misted down from Seoul's charcoal sky, turning the alley's concrete into a mirror that reflected neon signs, red and blue and amber, the colors of a city that never truly slept. Somewhere nearby, a car engine revved. Music pulsed from an underground club 3 blocks away. The ordinary sounds of midnight in Gangnam. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. She pressed her palms against the cold brick wall and focused on breathing. What had she done? What had possessed her to stand there, look Seo Kong-jun directly in the eyes, and refuse to apologize for choosing a stranger's life over his convenience? Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, warm, musical, laced with the particular wisdom of women who had survived far worse than Imani could imagine. "Dignity is the one thing they cannot take unless you surrender it, my daughter. Guard it with your life." Easy words to remember in the safety of their Lagos home, surrounded by sisters and aunts and the familiar scent of jollof rice simmering in the kitchen. Harder to practice when standing before Seoul's most dangerous man. But she had done it. And somehow, impossibly, she had survived. "Imani!" She turned to find her friend Suman bursting through the service door, still wearing her hostess uniform, her carefully styled hair escaping its pins in her haste. "Are you okay?" Suman grabbed Imani's hands. "I saw everything. I was sure he would. I'm fine." Imani managed a shaky smile. "He didn't hurt me." "Didn't hurt you." Suman's voice rose to a pitch that startled pigeons from a nearby fire escape. "He didn't hurt you. Imani, do you understand what you did tonight? I helped someone who was choking. You challenged Seo Kong-jun." Suman looked genuinely terrified. In public. In front of everyone. The servers are saying it's the first time anyone has spoken to him like that and lived to. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. Do you know who he is? Really no. Imani pulled her hands free and wrapped her arms around herself. The rain was picking up, dotting her white blouse with tiny dark spots. I know the rumors, she said quietly. The same ones everyone knows. The rumors. Sumin laughed without humor. The rumors don't even begin to cover it. His family has controlled the underground in Seoul for 3 generations. Legitimate business on top, shadow empire underneath. He owns judges. He owns politicians. He owns. She stopped, glanced around the empty alley, lowered her voice. 3 years ago, a businessman from Japan tried to undercut one of his real estate deals. That businessman was never seen again. Not him, not his family, not even his dogs. Imani felt cold despite knowing she should have expected this. And you, Sumin continued. You stood there and told him that wine can wait while life cannot. Hearing her own words repeated back, Imani couldn't help but recognize their audacity, their absurdity, their potential death sentence. What was I supposed to do? She asked quietly. Let an old woman die. Sumin's expression softened. This was what bound them together. This understanding that some things mattered more than survival. Sumin had been Imani's first friend in Seoul, hired at Lumiere the same week, both of them young women trying to carve out existence in a city that hadn't been designed to welcome them. You did the right thing, Sumin said finally. But doing the right thing doesn't always keep you safe. Well, didn't. Imani thought of her family back in Lagos, her mother still recovering from surgery that had drained every naira from their savings. Her younger sister Adiz, brilliant enough for university but too poor to attend. Her grandmother, keeping everything together through sheer force of will and prayer. If something happened to Imani, they would have nothing. She was their lifeline. The money she sent home each month meant medicine, food, school fees. Without her. He said I made the correct choice. Sumin stared at her. What? At the end. Before he left. Imani heard the words as if someone else was speaking them. He said I made the correct choice. In front of everyone. Her friend's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. That doesn't. I know. Didn't make sense. Nothing about his response made sense. The feared Mafia boss, publicly acknowledging that his demands should have been ignored in favor of saving a stranger's life. It contradicted everything everyone believed about him. Or perhaps it revealed that everyone's beliefs were wrong. Maybe he's not. Imani started. Don't. Sumin's voice sharpened. Don't convince yourself that he's secretly noble, Imani. Men like him aren't complicated. They're dangerous. Whatever happened tonight, whatever reason he had for not destroying you publicly, don't mistake it for kindness. Imani nodded slowly. But she couldn't shake the memory of that moment. His eyes meeting hers across the dining room, that strange flicker beneath the ice. Something had passed between them. Something she didn't understand. And against every instinct warning her toward caution, Imani found herself wanting to understand. 3 days later, Imani sat in the cramped kitchen of her Gazawan, a room barely large enough to contain a single bed, a small desk, and a hot plate. Rain streaked down the window, blurring the neon lights of Sinchan's student district into watercolor smears of red and gold. She was supposed to be studying. Her culinary textbook lay open on the desk, diagrams of proper knife techniques staring up at her with mechanical precision. In 8 months, she would complete her certification. In a year, perhaps she could find work in a real kitchen, sous chef, line cook, anything that would allow her to earn more without destroying her body carrying trays for 12 hours straight. Months. She just had to survive 8 months. But the words on the page kept blurring, replaced by the memory of dark eyes and absolute stillness. You made the correct choice. Why had he said that? Why had he defended her, even implicitly, in front of every power broker in Seoul? Imani had spent 3 days analyzing the moment from every angle, and she still couldn't find an explanation that satisfied her. Men like Seo Kong-jun didn't tolerate public challenges. They certainly didn't validate the challengers. Her phone buzzed against the desk. Mama Okonkwo. Imani answered immediately. Mama. Imani, my daughter. Her mother's voice carried across oceans, warm despite the distance. How are you? Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Yes, Mama. I'm fine. You always say fine. Fine is what people say when they don't want to worry anyone. Imani smiled despite herself. I'm really okay. Just tired. And your studies? Going well. I'll finish the certification program in 8 months. 8 months. Her mother's sigh traveled through the phone line. Then you come home. Then I see where the best opportunities are. Imani chose her words carefully. Maybe Seoul. Maybe Lagos. Maybe somewhere else. Lagos needs good cooks. Lagos needs you home. The ache that followed was familiar. The constant pull between duty and distance, between the family she loved and the future she was trying to build for them. How is your health, Mama? Was. Too long. Mama. The doctor says the second surgery may be needed sooner than expected. Imani's heart clenched. How soon? 3 months. Maybe 4. 3 months. The deposit alone would cost. Imani did the math quickly, desperately. More than she could save in that time frame. Even working double shifts. Even skipping meals. How much? Her mother named a figure that made Imani close her eyes. I'll find a way, she heard herself say. Don't worry about the money, Mama. I'll handle it. Imani. I have to go. Love you. Tell Adiz and Grandmama I love them too. She disconnected before her mother could hear her voice break. The next morning, Imani arrived at Lumiere Seoul before anyone else. The restaurant didn't open for brunch service until 11, but she needed to speak with Mr. Cho, needed to ask about additional shifts, overtime, anything. She used her employee entrance code and slipped through the service door, moving silently through the pre-dawn darkness of the kitchen. The space that would soon fill with heat and shouting and the symphony of culinary creation now lay silent, stainless steel surfaces gleaming under emergency lighting. Beautiful in its way. Imani loved kitchens. She loved the alchemy of them, the transformation of raw ingredients into art, sustenance, comfort. Someday she would have her own kitchen. Someday she would create dishes that blended her heritage with the techniques she'd learned here. Fusion that honored both worlds. Someday. But first, her mother needed surgery. She pushed through the swinging doors into the dining room and stopped. She wasn't alone. A figure stood near the windows, silhouetted against Seoul's gray dawn. Unmistakable. Kyo Kung-jun. Imani's breath caught. He turned slowly, as if he'd known she was there before she'd made a sound. He wore a black overcoat that probably cost more than her annual tuition, dark slacks, a charcoal turtleneck that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was damp, rain, she realized, noticing the drops still clinging to the shoulders of his coat. He'd been waiting. For how long? Ms. Okonkwo. His voice filled the empty room with quiet authority. Imani forced herself to move forward. Show no fear. Guard your dignity. The restaurant isn't open yet, she said evenly. Sir, I'm aware. He watched her approach with that same unsettling intensity from 3 nights ago. In daylight, or rather in the gray half-light of pre-dawn, she could see details she'd missed before. The precise cut of his jaw. The faint shadows beneath his eyes suggesting he slept poorly. The thin scar bisecting his right eyebrow, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. The tattoo at his wrist, visible where his sleeve had ridden up. Black ink forming a coiled serpent wrapped around what might have been a chrysanthemum. Beautiful and dangerous like everything about him. Then may I ask why you're here? Imani kept her voice professional. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. White, unmarked, elegant. He extended it toward her. What is this? Open it. Against her better judgment, Imani took the envelope. Inside, she found a cashier's check made out to cash. The amount made her vision swim. I don't understand. 3 nights ago, you prioritized human life over convenience, over safety, over your own survival. His voice remained quiet, but she heard something beneath it. Something almost like respect. That decision may have consequences you haven't anticipated. Consequences. Not everyone who witnessed that evening has favorable opinions of me. Some of them might see an opportunity in the woman who publicly challenged Seo Kong-jun without punishment. The implication landed like a stone in her stomach. You're saying people might target me. I'm saying Seoul's underground operates on perception. You created a perception problem that some may wish to exploit. He paused. This is compensation for that risk. Imani stared at the check in her hands. Enough money to pay for her mother's surgery. Enough to secure Adi's education. Enough to change everything. Too much. Far, far too much. I can't accept this. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps. You would refuse. I didn't stand up to you for money. Imani held the envelope back toward him. I did it because a woman was dying. That's not something you compensate someone for. He didn't take the envelope back. You misunderstand, he said slowly. This isn't payment for your actions. It's protection. I don't need your protection. Yes. His voice dropped even quieter. You do. They stood facing each other in the empty restaurant, the check suspended between them. An offer she needed desperately and couldn't accept, a bridge she couldn't let him build. Why? Imani asked finally. Why do you care what happens to a waitress who embarrassed you in public? You didn't embarrass me. Then what did I do? Seo Kong-jun was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, rougher somehow, more human. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Before Imani could ask what he meant, he reached out and gently closed her fingers around the envelope. Take it, he said quietly. Use it however you need. And be careful, Ms. Okonkwo. There are those who will see your courage as an invitation. Then he stepped past her, moving toward the service entrance with the silent grace of someone who had spent his life entering and exiting rooms without permission. Wait. He paused at the door. Imani didn't know what she intended to say. Thank you. I don't understand you. Why are you nothing like the monster everyone describes? But the words that emerged were simpler, stripped of everything except honesty. My name is Imani. It means faith. Seo Kong-jun looked back at her over his shoulder. In the gray dawn light, she could have sworn she saw something like a smile ghost across his features. Faith, he repeated softly. How appropriate. Then he was gone. 2 weeks passed. Imani sent the money to Lagos. Enough for her mother's surgery. Enough for Adi's first semester of university. Enough to ensure her grandmother could finally repair the roof that had been leaking for 3 years. She didn't explain where the money came from. How could she? A mafia boss gave me more than I make in 5 years because I refused to bring him wine while a woman was choking. Even she wouldn't believe that story. At Lumiere, she returned to her routine. Brunch service, dinner service, the endless choreography of carrying trays and pouring wine and pretending not to notice when wealthy men looked at her a moment too long. Mr. Cho treated her with new respect since the incident, though she noticed him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't read. Fear, curiosity, suspicion. She tried not to think about it. She tried not to think about him. But that was impossible. Because everywhere she turned, she felt echoes of his presence. The private dining room where he always sat, now conspicuously empty, though Mr. Cho confirmed his reservation remained permanently held. The elderly widow Mrs. Park, who returned weekly now and always requested to sit in Imani's section, leaving extravagant tips and pressing Imani's hands between her own papery fingers. The other servers who looked at Imani differently now, some with admiration, others with something darker. You're marked, Suman told her one night after close, both of them changing in the cramped locker room behind the kitchen. Everyone's talking about it. Talking about what? About how Seo Kong-jun let you live. About what you must have done to earn that mercy. Imani stiffened. I didn't do anything. I stood up for what was right, and he what? Decided you were special. Suman's voice carried an edge of fear rather than jealousy. Don't you understand? The moment he showed you favor, you became a target. His enemies will want to hurt him. His allies will watch you to understand his weaknesses. And everyone else. She trailed off. Everyone else what? Everyone else will wonder what you're hiding. That night, walking home through rain-slick streets, Imani noticed the car for the first time. Black sedan. Tinted windows. Parked across from her Gazawan building. She told herself it was nothing. Paranoia fueled by Sumin's warnings. Seoul was full of black sedans. But when she emerged for her morning run at 5 a.m., the sedan was still there. Different position. Same vehicle. 3 days later, she caught a man photographing her as she waited for the subway at Sinchon Station. He disappeared into the crowd before she could confront him. The following week, she received a phone call from an unknown number. When she answered, there was only breathing, slow, deliberate, before the line went dead. Someone was watching her. Someone was documenting her movements. And Imani had no idea what they wanted. The break-in happened on a Thursday night. Imani returned from a double shift to find her door slightly ajar, the lock scratched around the edges. Inside, her tiny room had been methodically searched. Drawers opened, textbooks rifled through, the loose floorboard where she kept her emergency cash pried up and replaced carelessly. Nothing appeared to be missing, which was somehow more terrifying than theft. She stood in the middle of her violated space, hands shaking, mind racing. Call the police. And tell them what? That someone had broken in and taken nothing. They would write a report that would disappear into bureaucratic limbo. They might even suspect her of staging the incident. Call her mother. Absolutely not. Mama Okonkwo had just survived surgery. She didn't need to know that her daughter was in danger. Imani looked down at her phone and realized she had no one to call. Except the envelope he'd given her had included a business card. Plain white cardstock, expensive paper. Nothing printed on it except a phone number. She'd kept it, though she'd told herself she didn't know why. She knew why. Her fingers found the card before she consciously decided to use it. The phone rang once. Ms. Okonkwo. His voice. Quiet. Unsurprised. As if he'd been waiting for this call. Someone broke into my apartment. When he spoke again, the quiet had transformed into something sharper. Are you injured? No. I wasn't here. I came home and... Leave now. What? Leave your apartment immediately. Don't take anything. Don't speak to anyone. Walk to the corner of Yonhwero and Sinchonara. You'll be collected in 4 minutes. Collected? I don't. 4 minutes, Ms. Okonkwo. Start walking. The line went dead. Imani stood at the intersection he'd named, rain misting her hair, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was insane. She was standing on a street corner in the middle of the night, waiting for criminals to collect her, because she'd called a Mafia boss when her apartment was broken into. What was wrong with her? A black SUV materialized from the darkness. Not the sedan that had been watching her, something larger, more expensive, more threatening. It glided to a stop beside her, and the rear door opened. Warm light spilled out. Inside she saw leather seats, tinted windows, and Jo Kungjun. He sat in the far corner, still in the suit he must have worn to whatever business occupied his evenings. His face unreadable in the amber glow of the interior lights. The tattoo on his wrist caught the light as he extended one hand toward her. Get in. Imani hesitated. Now, Ms. Okonkwo. She got in. The door closed behind her, sealing them into a bubble of warmth and leather and the faint scent of sandalwood. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic, merging with the late-night flow of Seoul's arteries. Tell me exactly what you found. Imani described the scene, the scratched lock, the searched drawers, the pried floorboard. She watched his face as she spoke, searching for any reaction, but his expression remained carved from stone. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. The men watching you, he said finally. You noticed them. You know about that. I know everything that happens in my city. My city. The casual possessiveness of it should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something else. Something like awe at the scope of power he wielded so matter-of-factly. Who are they? I'm still determining that. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But I have suspicions. Tell me. He looked at her then, really looked at her with those dark eyes that seemed to see through every defense she'd built. 3 weeks ago, you witnessed something at the restaurant. Meeting. 2 men speaking in the private garden near the service entrance. Imani's blood ran cold. She'd forgotten about that. Or rather, she'd tried to forget. Had convinced herself that what she'd seen meant nothing, that overhearing fragments of a conversation in a language she barely understood couldn't possibly matter. I wasn't trying to. I know. His voice softened slightly. You were taking a break. They didn't see you. But someone else did. Someone else. A security guard. Employed by one of the men you saw. His hand curled into a fist against his thigh, the tattoo flexing with the movement. That guard has been monitoring you ever since. Trying to determine what you know. What you might reveal. The implications crashed over Imani like a wave. What did I see? She whispered. What were they talking about? Seo Kongjun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to barely more than a breath. Something that could destroy very powerful people. Something that could start a war. I don't understand. You don't need to understand. He turned toward her fully, and she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something almost like desperation. You need to stay alive. And right now, the only way to ensure that is for you to stay close to me. Stay close to. There's a safe house. A residence I maintain for situations requiring discretion. You'll stay there until I've eliminated the threat. I can't just. You can. His hand moved toward hers, then stopped, hovering in the space between them as if he'd thought better of the gesture. You will. Because the alternative is unacceptable. Unacceptable to who? The question hung in the air between them. Seo Kongjun didn't answer. But his eyes said everything his words wouldn't. Me. The safe house turned out to be a penthouse apartment in Hanamdong, in a building so exclusive that Imani hadn't even known it existed. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Seoul stretched out like a circuit board below. Millions of lights, millions of lives, all of them unaware that somewhere above them, a Nigerian waitress was hiding from dangers she didn't understand. You'll have everything you need here. Seo Kongjun stood near the entrance, hands clasped behind his back, maintaining careful distance from where she explored the space. Food will be delivered. The building is secure. My men are stationed on every access point. Your men. Former military. Private security. Loyal. Loyal to you. Yes. Imani ran her fingers along the arm of a leather sofa that probably cost more than her entire education. The apartment was beautiful. Sleek lines, modern art, views that belonged in magazines, but it felt empty, impersonal. A space designed for temporary occupation, not living. How long? She asked without turning around. As long as necessary. And my job. My classes. Your employer has been informed that you're taking personal leave. Your program director has been contacted to arrange remote instruction. She spun toward him. You arranged that. Without asking me. Your safety takes precedence over protocol. My life takes precedence over your assumptions. The words burst out before she could stop them. You don't get to make decisions for me. You don't get to move me around like a chess piece just because you feel guilty about. This isn't guilt. The quiet ferocity of his voice stopped her mid-sentence. Then what is it? Seo Kongjun crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. He stopped close, too close, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse jumping in his throat beneath the collar of his shirt. I don't know, he said roughly. I don't know what it is. I've spent 3 weeks trying to understand why I can't stop thinking about you. Why your face is the last thing I see before I sleep. Why the thought of anyone harming you makes me want to. He stopped himself, drew a breath, stepped back. The distance returned. But the words lingered in the air between them, impossible to unsay. You don't know me, Imani whispered. No. His eyes met hers. But I want to. The admission hung between them, raw, vulnerable, completely at odds with everything she thought she knew about him. Seo Kang-joon, the feared mafia boss. The ruthless businessman. The man whose name made powerful people tremble. And he was standing in front of her, confessing that he couldn't stop thinking about a waitress who'd told him his wine could wait. "I should go," he said finally. "You should rest. There's clothing in the bedroom. I had it sent based on your sizes from your work uniform. I hope it's adequate." "You had clothing sent for me? You can't very well stay in what you're wearing indefinitely." "Practical, course. Nothing personal about it." "Yet, thank you," Imani heard herself say. "For all of this. Even though I still don't understand why you're doing it." Seo Kang-joon paused at the door. He looked back at her, and in the soft light of the penthouse, she saw the weariness beneath his controlled exterior. The loneliness. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "some things don't need to be understood, only accepted." Then he was gone, and Imani was alone with questions that multiplied every time he answered one. She didn't sleep that first night. She sat by the window instead, watching Seoul's lights blink in and out of existence, trying to make sense of the impossible situation she'd found herself in. Protected by a man everyone feared. Targeted for something she'd accidentally witnessed. Drawn to someone she should be running from. Near dawn, she found herself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, searching her reflection for answers. Her mother's eyes looked back at her. Dark, expressive, full of the stubborn determination that had carried her through immigration hurdles and discrimination and endless nights of missing home. What would Mama say? She knew exactly what Mama would say. "Trust your heart, Imani. It knows things your head hasn't learned yet." But her heart was confused. Her heart kept returning to the moment when Seo Kang-joon had looked at her across the restaurant and said she'd made the correct choice. To the way his voice had cracked when he'd admitted he couldn't stop thinking about her. To the desperate restraint in his posture every time he stood close enough to touch her. He was dangerous. He was damaged. And somehow, impossibly, he was exactly what she needed. The next 3 days blurred together. Food arrived at regular intervals. Korean dishes she recognized, Nigerian dishes she hadn't eaten since leaving Lagos. How did he know? She didn't ask. Books appeared on the coffee table, her textbooks, somehow retrieved from her ransacked apartment, alongside novels she'd mentioned wanting to read in passing conversations with Soo-min. Had he been listening that long? And on the evening of the third day, Seo Kang-joon himself appeared. He stood in the doorway of the penthouse, rain dampening his black overcoat, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. "We need to talk." Imani led him to the living room, waited while he removed his coat, watched the way his movements had lost some of their characteristic control. Something had happened. Something had changed. "The men watching you," he said finally. "They weren't working for who I initially suspected." Who were they working for? He was silent for a long moment. "My father." The word landed like a blow. "Your father." Seo Min-joon. Former head of the organization I now lead. Currently residing in a secure medical facility due to declining health. His voice remained steady, but she could hear the effort beneath it. "I believed he'd removed himself from our operations when he transferred power to me 5 years ago. I was wrong. Why would your father have me watched?" Seo Kang-joon looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never expected to see. Fear. "Because he knows," he said quietly. "He knows I've been visiting the restaurant to see you. He knows I've been having you protected. He knows I'm..." He stopped. "You're what? Compromised." The word emerged rough, pained. "Because of you. He sees you as a weakness. An opening. Something my enemies could use against me." Imani felt the blood drain from her face. "And the men at my apartment. The break-in. Yes. My father testing how quickly I would respond. How protective I would become." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "He was right. I responded exactly as he predicted. And now everyone in my organization knows that harming you would be the fastest way to destabilize me." The implications crashed over her. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a liability. "Then I should leave," she heard herself say. Distance myself from you. Go back to my life. You can't. His voice cracked on the words. It's too late. Everyone who matters already knows. And my father has made certain that the information has reached people outside our organization as well. Competitors, enemies, people who have spent years looking for any way to hurt me. So what do we do? Seo Kongjun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely more than a whisper. There's only one option that makes strategic sense. One move that would protect us both. Imani waited. Marriage. The word echoed in the silence. You have to marry M.E. What will Imani decide? The feared Mafia boss has just proposed. But is this protection or a prison? And with enemies closing in from every direction, she must choose. Trust the man everyone warns her to fear, or run from the one person who might be able to keep her alive. The truth about what Imani witnessed. The secret Seo Kongjun's father is hiding. The dangerous web of loyalty and betrayal that threatens to consume them. Both. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Dangerous, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Marriage. Imani stared at Seo Kongjun, searching his face for any sign that this was a cruel joke, a test, anything other than what it appeared to be. But his expression remained carved from granite, those dark eyes watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound that echoed off the penthouse's pristine walls. 3 weeks ago I was serving you wine. Now you want me to be your wife. I want you to be alive. His voice dropped lower. Marriage would place you under the full protection of my organization. Attacking my wife would be an act of war, not just against me, but against every alliance I've built over the past decade. No one would risk that. So this is strategy. This is survival. Imani turned away from him, pressing her palm against the cold window. Soul glittered below, indifferent to the impossible choice being placed before her. And what about love? She asked quietly. What about wanting to spend your life with someone because you can't imagine existing without them? That means nothing. Silence. She felt rather than heard him move closer. The warmth of his body radiated against her back, though he maintained careful distance. Imani. Her name in his mouth. Not Ms. Okonkwo. Not the formal distance he'd maintained since their first encounter. Her name spoken like a prayer. Look at me. He turned. He stood close enough that she could count his eyelashes, could see the thin scar through his eyebrow, could trace the tension in his jaw as he fought for words. I am not a good man, he said roughly. I've done things that would horrify you. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. I built an empire on foundations most people can't even imagine, and I've spent my entire adult life believing that I would never. He stopped, followed. That I would never deserve anything pure. Kongjun. But then you looked at me. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek without quite touching. You looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster. Not a means to an end. Just a man who wanted his wine while someone was dying, and deserved to be told no. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. That night when you walked away from my table, his voice fractured. I felt something break open inside me. Something I thought died a long time ago. What? His hand finally made contact, the barest brush of fingertips against her cheekbone, tender beyond anything she would have expected from hands that had done what his must have done. Hope. The word shattered something inside Imani. She stepped back, needing distance, needing air, needing to think without his presence overwhelming every rational thought. I can't answer you tonight. I understand. I need to process. I need to. Take whatever time you require. His hand dropped to his side, and the controlled mask slid back into place. I'll have additional security assigned. You'll be safe here while you decide. And if I say no? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain quickly suppressed. Then I'll find another way to protect you. One that doesn't require your participation. He turned toward the door. Kongjun. He paused, his back still toward her. The conversation I overheard. At the restaurant. Imani hugged herself against the chill of questions too long unanswered. What did those men actually say? What am I caught up in? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly. They were discussing the assassination of a sitting government official. A minister who has been inconvenient to certain business interests. Murder. Yes. And they were speaking where anyone could have heard. They believed they were alone. The garden is supposed to be swept for surveillance before any private meeting. His shoulders tensed. Someone failed in their duties that night. That failure may have cost you everything. Imani's mind raced. But I don't know who they were. I didn't understand most of what they said. My Korean isn't. You could identify them. He turned back to face her. You saw their faces. If pressed, under interrogation or through other means, you could describe them well enough for identification. That makes you a witness. That makes you dangerous. Dangerous. She laughed bitterly. I'm a culinary student working as a waitress. I send money home to my mother every month. I own 3 pairs of shoes. How am I dangerous to anyone? Because you have integrity. His voice carried something that sounded almost like wonder. Because you would tell the truth if asked. Because everyone who has ever interacted with you knows that you cannot be bought, cannot be threatened into silence, cannot be controlled. You don't know that. I know exactly that. He took one step toward her. That's what drew me to you in the first place. That's what terrifies everyone else. After he left, Imani didn't sleep. She paced the penthouse like a caged animal, her mind churning through impossibilities. Marriage to a mafia boss. Protection through alliance. A lifetime bound to a man she barely knew, whose world operated by rules she couldn't comprehend. But what was the alternative? Running. She had nowhere to go. Her mother needed ongoing care. Her sister had just started university on the funds Kong Jun had provided. Funds that would dry up instantly if Imani vanished. Going to the police. She nearly laughed aloud at the thought. In Seoul's power structure, men like Seo Kong-jun didn't answer to law enforcement. Law enforcement answered to men like Seo Kong-jun. Hiding. Where? How? With what resources? Every path she considered led to the same destination. She needed protection she couldn't provide for herself, and only one person was offering it. Near dawn, exhausted and raw, she found herself standing before the window again. The sky had begun to lighten, Seoul's infinite gray giving way to pale gold at the horizon. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered against her better judgment. Ms. Okonkwo. A voice she didn't recognize. Male, older, speaking Korean with an accent she couldn't place. I believe we should meet. Who is this? Someone who can offer you an alternative to my son's proposal. Imani's blood ran cold. You're Seo Min-jun. You're quick. But I value intelligence in my allies. And make no mistake, Ms. Okonkwo, we could be allies. Beneficial ones. Your son said you're the one who had me watched. Who had my apartment searched. My son says many things. Not all of them true. The voice carried amusement, which somehow made it more frightening. I simply wanted to understand the woman who had captured his attention so completely. The woman for whom he has neglected business, ignored strategic opportunities, and demonstrated weakness that his enemies have already begun to notice. I haven't done anything. You've done everything. The amusement faded, replaced by steel. You've made him human again. And humans, Ms. Okonkwo, are easily destroyed. The line went dead. Imani didn't tell Kong-jun about the call. She knew she should. She knew that keeping secrets from the man trying to protect her was dangerous, possibly fatal. But something about Min-jun's words had lodged beneath her skin like a splinter. You've made him human again. What had Kong-jun been before? What had his father shaped him into? And at what cost? That afternoon, she found the answers in the most unlikely place. A news archive accessed through the penthouse's absurdly sophisticated entertainment system. Kyo Kong-jun, age 23. Headlines from 16 years ago. Gangnam Massacre claims 7. So family underboss among the dead. Young heir survives assassination attempt that killed his mother. Bloody power struggle leaves crime dynasty in chaos. Imani read the articles with growing horror. At 23, Kong Jun had watched his mother die in his arms, shot by rivals who had stormed a family gathering meant to celebrate his younger sister's birthday. The sister had survived. His mother had not. The attack had been ordered by a former ally. Someone his father had trusted implicitly. After the massacre, according to the carefully worded reports, the CO organization had undergone restructuring. Kong Jun had emerged 3 years later as undisputed heir. His father stepping back due to health concerns. Reading between the lines, Imani understood. Those 3 years had been war. Kong Jun had spent them eliminating the people responsible for his mother's death, one by one, until no one remained who could challenge his authority. He had built his empire on blood and grief. And somewhere along the way, he had buried the boy who'd cradled his dying mother in his arms. Until a waitress who'd told him his wine could wait. That evening, Kong Jun returned. He found her in the study, surrounded by printed articles. Her face streaked with tears. She hadn't realized she'd been crying. He stopped in the doorway, looked at what she'd discovered, said nothing. "Your mother," Imani whispered. "I'm so sorry." Something shattered behind his eyes. The controlled mask cracked, just for a moment, revealing the devastation beneath. Her name was Ji-yun. His voice emerged raw. She painted. Watercolors mostly. Mountains and rivers and cherry blossoms. She used to say that beauty was the only rebellion worth fighting for. Imani rose slowly, crossing the distance between them. "She sounds wonderful." She was. He swallowed hard. "She would have liked you. She would have." His voice broke. "She would have understood why I can't let anyone hurt you." Imani reached out, hesitated, then let her hand rest against his chest. Beneath the expensive fabric of his suit, she felt his heart pounding. Rapid, uncontrolled, human. "I read about the 3 years after," she said quietly. "What you did." He flinched. "I understand if you..." "No." She shook her head. "I'm not judging you. I'm trying to understand. The boy in those photos, the one standing beside his mother at charity events. Where did he go?" "He died." Kong Jun's hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his chest. "The night she died, he died with her. What remained was something else. Something useful. Something that could survive. Something that couldn't feel. Something that couldn't afford to feel." His eyes found hers. "Until you made me remember what it was like. Until you looked at me like I wasn't a monster and made me wonder if I could be something else." Imani felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. "Kong Jun, you asked me once why I cared what happened to a waitress." His free hand rose to cup her face, thumb brushing away tears with devastating gentleness. "This is why. Because you make me want to be the man my mother believed I could become. Because when I'm with you I feel like maybe, there's still something inside me worth saving. There is." The words emerged before she could stop them. "There is, Kong Jun. I've seen it. From the very first moment when you didn't punish me for defying you. I saw it." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, sharing the same space, balanced on the edge of something neither of them could name. "I'll do it," Imani whispered. He went still. "I'll marry you." His breath caught audibly. "Not because I'm afraid," she continued. "Not because I have no other choice. But because I believe you. Because I see the man you're trying to become. Because..." She paused, gathering courage. "Because when I'm with you, I feel something I've never felt before. Something that terrifies me and makes me brave at the same time." Kong Jun pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. The emotion swimming in his gaze was almost too intense to bear. "Imani. But I need you to understand something." She held his gaze fiercely. "I won't be a trophy. I won't be silent when I disagree with you. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not just because I'm the wife of CO Kong Jun. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, respect, something dangerously close to adoration. I would never ask you to. And I need to finish my culinary program. I need to keep working, keep building the life I came here to create. Of course. And my family will never want for anything again. His voice carried absolute certainty. Your mother will have the best medical care in the world. Your sister will complete her education anywhere she chooses. Your grandmother will have everything she needs. Imani's breath shuddered. You'd do that. I'd do anything. His thumb traced her cheekbone with reverent tenderness. Anything for you. The engagement was announced 3 days later. Seoul's elite reacted with predictable chaos. Headlines screamed from every news outlet. So Kong-jun announces engagement to foreign national. The polite phrasing couldn't disguise the scandal. The most powerful man in South Korea's shadow world, engaged to a Nigerian waitress with no family connections, no social standing, nothing that made strategic sense. The rumors multiplied exponentially. She was a gold digger. She was a spy. She was carrying his child. She was blackmailing him. She was a secret princess from African royalty. She was nobody, nothing, a temporary distraction he would discard within months. Imani ignored all of it. She had more pressing concerns. The engagement dinner, a formal gathering meant to introduce her to the key figures in Kong-jun's world, loomed 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to transform from waitress to worthy. 3 weeks to learn the names, the histories, the complex web of alliances and enmities that defined his existence. You'll have help, Kong-jun assured her. My sister has agreed to serve as your guide. His sister. The one who had survived the massacre that claimed their mother. Seo Min-ji arrived at the penthouse on a Tuesday afternoon, trailing the scent of expensive perfume and barely concealed curiosity. She was beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, elegant features, eyes that carried the same dangerous intelligence as her brother's. But where Kong-jun radiated cold control, Min-ji sparkled with something warmer, something almost mischievous. So, she circled Imani slowly, examining her like a particularly interesting exhibit. You're the woman who told my brother his wine could wait. I am. The whole city's talking about it, you know. People are calling it the most romantic thing they've ever heard. Min-ji's lips curved into a genuine smile. I call it the most satisfying. He's been insufferably arrogant since he took over the organization. Someone needed to knock him down a few pegs. Imani found herself smiling back. Happy to help. Oh, I like you. Min-ji clapped her hands together. This might actually be fun. Now, let's discuss everything you need to know to survive the engagement dinner without causing an international incident. The next 2 weeks became a crash course in survival. Min-ji proved to be an excellent teacher. Patient when Imani struggled with Korean honorifics, merciless when she made mistakes in etiquette, and surprisingly forthcoming about the dangers hidden beneath the glamorous surface of her brother's world. The man at the far end of the table will be Park Sung-hoon, Min-ji explained, gesturing at photographs spread across the study's desk. His legitimate business is pharmaceuticals. His illegitimate business is everything the pharmaceuticals are supposed to prevent. He hates my brother because Kong-jun refused to let him expand into our territory 3 years ago. Why is he coming to the engagement dinner if he hates Kong-jun? Because refusing to attend would be an open declaration of war, and he's not ready for that. Min-ji smiled coldly. Yet. And the woman beside him. His mistress. Officially, she's his business associate. Unofficially, she's the one who actually runs his organization while he drinks himself into a stupor every night. Imani studied the photograph. A striking woman in her 40s, with calculating eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Is she dangerous? Everyone at that dinner will be dangerous. Min-ji's voice softened. That's what you need to understand, Imani. These aren't business people having a social gathering. They're predators assessing a new variable in the ecosystem. They'll smile and congratulate you while searching for every possible weakness. Then why are we doing this? Because refusing to introduce you would make you look like something to be hidden. Something shameful. Minji's hand found Imani's arm, squeezing gently. You're not. You're the woman my brother loves, whether he's admitted it in those exact words or not. You deserve to stand beside him publicly, and everyone else deserves to see exactly who they'll be dealing with if they threaten you. The woman my brother loves. The words echoed in Imani's mind long after Minji left. That night, Kongjun appeared at the penthouse unexpectedly. He found Imani in the study, surrounded by the photographs and dossiers Minji had provided. Her eyes red from hours of concentrated reading. You should rest. I should know who wants to destroy us. He crossed to where she sat, lowering himself into the adjacent chair with controlled grace. In the soft light, she could see the weariness he usually concealed, the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You've been studying all day. I've been preparing. She met his gaze. Your sister said something interesting. About predators assessing a new variable. Minji has always had a way with words. She also said. Imani paused, weighing how much to reveal. She said you love me. Kongjun went perfectly still. Do you? The question hung between them, more dangerous than anything else they discussed. Imani. Because I need to know what this is. She leaned forward, demanding honesty. I agreed to marry you for protection, for strategy. But if this is only strategy for you, I need to understand that now, before I let myself. Before you let yourself what? She looked away. Feel more than I should. Silence stretched between them. Then Kongjun reached across the space and turned her face gently back toward him. I have loved exactly one woman in my life, he said quietly. My mother. I loved her, and I couldn't protect her. And I spent 16 years convincing myself that love was a weakness I couldn't afford. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Then I met you. Imani's breath caught. I don't know how to do this. His voice cracked slightly. I don't know how to be vulnerable, how to trust, how to let someone close enough to hurt me. Everything I've learned about survival tells me to keep you at a distance. But every time I try, I find myself drawn back to you. His hand slid to cup her jaw, cradling her face with devastating tenderness. You've ruined me, Imani Okonkwo. Completely and thoroughly ruined me. Is that your way of saying you love me? Something flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability, hope, terror. Yes. The word emerged like a confession. Yes, love you. Against every instinct. Against every warning. I love you. Imani felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming force of hearing words she hadn't realized she'd needed. I love you too. The confession surprised her even as she spoke it. But the moment the words left her lips, she knew they were true. Had been true for longer than she wanted to admit. Kongjun's eyes closed briefly, as if absorbing an impact. When they opened, the controlled mask had vanished entirely. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, to reconsider, to protect herself. He didn't. Their lips met. The kiss was gentle at first. Tentative, questioning. But then his hand slid into her hair, and her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, and something caught fire between them. He pulled her closer. She went willingly. For one perfect moment, nothing existed except this. His mouth on hers, his arms around her, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally separated, both of them breathing hard, Kongjun pressed his forehead against hers. I meant what I said. His voice had gone rough. I'd do anything for you. Anything. I know. Whatever happens at the dinner, whatever threats emerge, we'll face them together. His arms tightened around her. Together, he repeated like a vow. The night of the engagement dinner arrived too quickly. Imani stood before the mirror in the penthouse's master bedroom, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The dress had been delivered that morning, deep burgundy silk that draped elegantly across her shoulders and fell in sculptural waves to the floor. Her hair had been styled by an artist whose client list included half of Seoul's celebrities. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, gifts from Kongjun that she tried to refuse and ultimately accepted. She looked like someone who belonged in his world. She felt like an imposter waiting to be exposed. Breathe. She turned to find Kong Jun in the doorway, magnificent in a black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the elegant tattoo at his wrist visible beneath perfectly tailored cuffs. His eyes swept over her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You're stunning. I'm terrified." "Good." He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could smell sandalwood and something darker. "Fear keeps you alert. It's the overconfident ones who get destroyed. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to keep you alive." His hand rose to adjust the diamond necklace at her throat, fingers brushing her collarbone with deliberate tenderness. "Remember what Minji taught you. Speak only when necessary. Never reveal more than required. Watch their eyes. Eyes tell you everything their words won't. What will your eyes tell them?" He met her gaze in the mirror's reflection. "That anyone who threatens you will die slowly." A shiver ran down her spine, half fear, half something else entirely. Ready? She wasn't. She would never be ready. But she took his offered arm anyway. The Seo family compound sprawled across a private estate in the hills above Seoul, traditional Korean architecture blending seamlessly with modern luxury, surrounded by walls that had protected its inhabitants for generations. Imani had seen photographs during her preparations, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. Stone pathways wound through manicured gardens illuminated by paper lanterns. Water features murmured in the darkness. The main house rose against the night sky like something from a historical drama. Elegant roof lines, massive wooden doors, windows glowing with warm light. Beautiful. And somehow terrifying. Guests had already begun to arrive. Black cars lined the circular drive, disgorging men in expensive suits and women in designer gowns. Security personnel moved through the shadows. Kong Jun's men she recognized, the discreet earpieces and watchful eyes giving them away. "Remember," Kong Jun murmured as they approached the entrance, "you have as much right to be here as anyone. I don't feel. You do." His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "You're about to become my wife. That makes you queen of this kingdom, whether they accept it or not." Queen. The word echoed strangely in her mind. Then the massive doors opened, and there was no more time for doubt. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. The main hall had been transformed for the occasion. Silk hangings in the Seo family colors, arrangements of white orchids and black roses, servers circulating with champagne that probably cost more per glass than Imani had once earned in a week. And everyone was staring. She felt their gazes like physical pressure. Measuring, calculating, judging. Conversations faltered as she passed. Whispers rose in her wake. Is that her? The Nigerian? What could he possibly see in? She kept her chin high and her expression serene. Guard your dignity, her mother's voice reminded her. They cannot take it unless you surrender it. Kong Jun guided her through the crowd with subtle pressure on the small of her back, pausing to accept congratulations, make introductions, establish the pecking order through nothing more than the angle of his nod. Park Sung-hoon, the pharmaceutical king, approached first, older than his photograph suggested, with a florid complexion of a man who drank too much and exercised too little. Kong Jun. His voice carried false warmth. And this must be your lovely fiancé. We've heard so much about you. Nothing good, I'm sure. The words escaped before Imani could stop them. Sung-hoon's eyes widened slightly. Behind her, she felt Kong Jun's hand tighten almost imperceptibly against her back. But then the pharmaceutical king laughed, genuine surprise mixing with something like respect. She has teeth. But you'll need them married to this one. The woman beside him, the mistress Minji had described, smiled without warmth. Such an interesting match. Tell me, Ms. Okonkwo, how exactly did you capture our stoic friend's attention? I told him no. Another ripple of surprise. No. The woman's eyebrows rose. To what? To whatever he wanted that wasn't as important as what someone else needed. Imani met the woman's calculating gaze without flinching. A skill I suspect you're familiar with. Something flickered in the woman's eyes. surprise, reassessment, perhaps even a touch of respect. "Interesting," she murmured. "Very interesting indeed." The evening proceeded in a blur of faces and names and veiled threats disguised as pleasantries. Imani moved through it like a swimmer through dangerous currents, staying afloat, navigating obstacles, never quite relaxing even when the water seemed calm. She remembered Minji's lessons. Watched eyes instead of trusting words. Revealed nothing more than necessary. And through it all, she felt Kongjun beside her. A steady presence, a silent promise. "I'm here. You're safe. We're together." Until they weren't. It happened near the end of the evening, during a moment when Kongjun had been pulled away by a minor emergency. Something about a supplier and a delayed shipment that required his immediate attention. "Go," Imani had told him. "I'll be fine." Famous last words. She had stepped onto the terrace for air, needing a moment away from the suffocating weight of so many watching eyes. The garden stretched below, silver with moonlight, peaceful and still. "Ms. Okonkwo." She turned to find an old man emerging from the shadows, frail, elegant, leaning on a cane carved from polished ebony. His eyes, however, contained nothing frail about them. She recognized him from the photographs. Kyo Minjun, Kongjun's father. "Mr. Seo." She inclined her head politely while her heart hammered against her ribs. "I wasn't aware you would be attending. I wasn't going to. But I found myself curious." He moved closer, his cane tapping against the terrace stones. "Curious about the woman who has accomplished what so many have tried and failed to achieve." "And what is that?" "Making my son vulnerable." The word landed like a blade. "Your son loves me." Imani kept her voice steady. "That's not vulnerability. That's strength." Minjun's thin lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Love is always vulnerability. Child. Gives others power over you. Power to hurt you. Power to destroy you." He paused. "Power to manipulate you into making choices that benefit others at your expense." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." He moved to stand beside her, looking out over the moonlit garden. "My son has enemies. Many of them are here tonight, smiling and offering congratulations while plotting his downfall. His attachment to you gives them a target. He's already considered that. It's why we're getting married, to place me under the protection of your organization." "My organization?" A quiet laugh. "Is that what he told you it was?" Something cold slithered down Imani's spine. "What do you mean?" "My son believes he controls everything. The territory, the alliances, the future." Minjun's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "But there are things he doesn't know. Decisions being made without his knowledge. Loyalties he trusts that have already shifted." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the variable, Ms. Okonkwo. The unknown factor that could change everything." His ancient eyes found hers. "I offered you an alternative once. An alliance. You never responded. I didn't see the point. Then let me make the point clearer." He leaned closer and his voice became ice. "My son's enemies are planning to move against him. They believe his attachment to you has made him weak, distracted, vulnerable to attack. And they may be right. If you know about this, why haven't you told him?" "Because the solution my son would choose would involve blood. Rivers of it. A war that would consume everything our family has built." Minjun's hand tightened on his cane. "There is another way. Cleaner way. A way that would protect my son without requiring his knowledge." "What way?" "You leave." The words crashed over her like cold water. "Leave. Tonight. Disappear before anyone realizes you're gone. I have resources, contacts outside Korea who can establish you anywhere in the world. New identity, new life, everything you would need to start over. And abandon Kongjun. Save him." Minjun's voice carried conviction. "His enemies want you because you're his weakness. Remove the weakness, remove the threat." Imani stared at the old man, her mind reeling. It made a terrible kind of sense. Everything Kong Jun had done to protect her had also painted a target on her back. Every gesture of love had demonstrated vulnerability his enemies could exploit. Maybe leaving was the kindest thing she could do. Maybe. No. The word surprised her even as she spoke it. Min Jun's eyes narrowed. You refuse. I refuse. Strength she didn't know she possessed flowed through her voice. I refuse to let his enemies dictate my choices. I refuse to abandon the man I love because running away is easier than fighting. And I refuse. She stepped closer to the old man, meeting his cold gaze with fire of her own. To trust you. Silence. Then, slowly, something shifted in Min Jun's expression. Something that might almost have been respect. Interesting, he murmured. Perhaps my son chose better than I realized. He turned and walked away, his cane tapping against the stones, leaving Imani alone with a racing heart and 1,000 new questions. She found Kong Jun 20 minutes later, her composure restored through sheer force of will. What happened? He caught her hands immediately, scanning her face for signs of distress. You look. Your father was here. His entire body went rigid. What did he say? Imani told him everything. The warning about enemies, the offer of escape, the implications she didn't fully understand. With every word, Kong Jun's expression darkened. He's playing games, he said finally. He's always playing games. Testing loyalty. Manipulating outcomes. He can't help himself. But the things he said about enemies planning to move against you, I know about them. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. I've known for weeks. I have plans in place. Plans that involve me. Plans that protect you. He pulled her closer, hands sliding around her waist. I would never use you as a pawn, Imani. Never. Whatever my father implied, whatever doubts he tried to plant. I don't doubt you. He stopped, searched her eyes. You should. His voice roughened. You should doubt everything about my world. The fact that you don't. The fact that you stayed even when my own father offered you a way out. I stayed because I love you. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. I stayed because running away would mean letting them win. It would mean surrendering the one thing my mother taught me to never surrender. Your dignity. My choice. Imani raised her hand to his cheek, feeling the tension in his jaw. I choose you, Kong Jun. With all the danger and uncertainty and fear. I choose this life with you. He closed his eyes. When they opened, they were bright with emotion he couldn't quite conceal. Then we face whatever comes together. Together, she agreed. He leaned down and kissed her. Gentle, reverent, a promise sealed in the darkness of the terrace while a house full of predators waited inside. The attack came 3 nights later. Imani was alone in the penthouse. Kong Jun away dealing with a supplier crisis that had escalated unexpectedly. When the power cut out, one moment light, the next absolute darkness. She froze, every nerve firing with primal awareness. Something was wrong. The penthouse had multiple backup systems. The power shouldn't have failed. Couldn't have failed. Unless someone had made it fail. She reached for her phone, but her hands found only empty pocket. She'd left it charging in the bedroom, 20 feet away. An infinite distance in the dark. Sound. The whisper of movement near the entrance. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. Think. Survive. Move. She remembered the layout of the penthouse. Every piece of furniture, every obstacle, every potential weapon. The kitchen had knives. The study had heavy bookends. The bedroom had the panic button Kong Jun had installed beside the bed. The bedroom was closest. She moved. 3 steps into the darkness. She heard the entrance door swing open. A step. Multiple sets. Moving with the confident silence of trained professionals. Imani ran. She crashed through the bedroom door, scrambling for the nightstand. Her fingers finding the smooth surface where the panic button should be. It wasn't there. Someone had removed it. Whoa. No. The bedroom door crashed open behind her. She spun, grabbing the heavy lamp from the nightstand, swinging it with all her strength at the shadow filling the doorway. Contact. A grunt of pain. But there were more shadows. Too many shadows. Hands grabbed her arms, her shoulders. Something covered her mouth before she could scream. The world tilted, spun, went dark at the edges. The last thing she heard was a voice. Cold, professional, utterly devoid of mercy. Package secured. Moving to secondary location. Then nothing. She woke to pain. Her head throbbed. Her wrists burned. Bound behind her, she realized, tied to a chair. The air smelled of damp concrete and rust. She forced her eyes open. Concrete walls. Industrial lighting. No windows. A warehouse somewhere. Across from her sat 3 men. 2 standing guard with weapons visible. 1 seated with a relaxed posture of someone who had all the time in the world. Ah! The seated man smiled. She's awake. Imani recognized him. Park Sung-hoon. The pharmaceutical king. You! Her voice came out cracked dry. You did this. I did many things. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. But this particular action is merely housekeeping. Removing a variable that has become inconvenient. Kong Jun will find me. Kong Jun will try. Sung-hoon's smile widened. He'll receive instructions shortly. Specific instructions about what happens to you if he doesn't comply with certain demands. What demands? Nothing too dramatic. Simply territory, resources, a restructuring of the balance of power that currently favors the CO family. He shrugged. Your beloved has become too powerful, Ms. Okonkwo. It makes the rest of us nervous. So you kidnap his fiancée. So I leverage his weakness. The smile disappeared. He should have known better. Men in his position can't afford attachments. Can't afford love. The moment he announced your engagement, he painted a target on your back. Imani thought of Minjun's warnings, of Sumin's fears, of every voice that had told her loving Seo Kongjun would be dangerous. They had all been right. And she didn't regret a thing. He'll come for me. I'm counting on it. Sung-hoon rose, straightening his jacket. Guards, keep her comfortable. We may be here for a while. He walked toward the door. Mr. Park. He paused. When he finds me. Imani's voice carried across the concrete space, steady despite her terror. And he will find me. I hope you've made peace with your gods. Something flickered in Sung-hoon's expression. Fear. Doubt. Then he laughed and walked away. But the laugh had sounded hollow. Hours passed. Or what felt like hours. Impossible to know without windows, without any way to measure time's passage. The guards rotated in shifts. Food arrived, rice and water, basic sustenance. No one spoke to her beyond barked commands. She tested her bindings during the rare moments she was alone. Professional. Not impossible given enough time. But time was something she didn't have. She thought about Kongjun. What was he doing right now? How had he reacted when he'd returned to find her gone? Was he tearing soul apart searching for her? Was he playing into exactly the trap Sung-hoon had set? Please, she thought, not knowing who she was praying to. Please let him be smart about this. Please don't let him do anything that gets him killed. Because she couldn't survive that. She had survived isolation and discrimination and poverty and the constant ache of being far from home. She could survive captivity, survive fear, survive whatever Sung-hoon had planned for her. But she couldn't survive losing him. Not now. Not after everything they'd found together. The explosion came without warning. One moment, silence. The next, the world shook. Imani's chair toppled sideways, crashing to the concrete floor as her guards shouted and chaos erupted around her. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms blared. Somewhere in the distance, she heard gunfire. Then footsteps. Running. Not running away. Running toward her. The door burst open, and through the haze of dust and smoke and terror, she saw him. Kyo Kongjun. Not the controlled businessman she'd met at the restaurant. Not the vulnerable man who'd confessed his love. This was something else. Something primal, something dangerous, something that had unleashed every darkness he'd spent years containing. His suit was torn. Blood smeared across his cheekbone. His eyes burned with an intensity that made her captors stumble backward. He looked like death incarnate. And he was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Imani. Her name in his mouth. Desperate, relieved, fierce. I'm here. Her voice cracked. I'm here. He moved faster than should have been possible, crossing the space, cutting her bindings with a blade that appeared from somewhere, pulling her into his arms with a grip that threatened to crack ribs. Don't. His voice shook against her hair. Don't ever, I can't. I know. She held him just as tightly. I know. Around them, his men secured the warehouse. Sung-hoon's guards surrendered or fled. The pharmaceutical king himself was nowhere to be seen. Escaped, presumably, though Imani suspected his freedom wouldn't last long. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was this. His arms around her, his heart pounding against hers, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. How did you find me? She whispered. I will always find you. He pulled back just enough to cradle her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with desperate gentleness. Always. There is nowhere they could take you that I wouldn't follow. No distance great enough. No obstacle strong enough. You are mine, Imani Okonkwo, and I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone take you from me. The ferocity of it should have frightened her. Didn't. Take me home, she said softly. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. Home, he repeated. Yes. The wedding took place 6 weeks later. Not the elaborate society event that Seoul's elite had expected. Instead, Imani and Kongjun exchanged vows in a small ceremony at the Seo family compound, surrounded by only those who truly mattered. Minji radiant in rose silk, a handful of Kongjun's most trusted associates, a video screen that connected Imani to her family in Lagos, allowing her mother and sister and grandmother to witness every moment despite the distance. The ceremony blended traditions. Korean customs honoring Kongjun's heritage, Nigerian elements celebrating Imani's roots, both families' histories woven together into something new. When Kongjun placed the ring on her finger, a band of platinum set with a single diamond the color of midnight, his hands trembled slightly. When she spoke her vows, her voice carried without wavering, strong and clear. I choose you, she said, echoing her words from the terrace all those weeks ago. With everything I am. With everything I have. I choose you, Seo Kongjun, today and every day that follows. His eyes glistened in the ceremony's candlelight. And I choose you, he responded. His voice rough with emotion. Against every instinct that told me to never love again. Against every fear that warned me I would lose you. I choose you, Imani Okonkwo. My courage, my faith, my home. When they kissed, Imani heard her mother crying through the video screen. Happy tears, relieved tears, the kind of tears that came from watching your child find exactly where they belonged. Park Sung-hoon vanished from Seoul that same week. His pharmaceutical empire crumbled within months. Contracts revoked, licenses suspended, assets frozen by investigations that somehow found evidence of every illegal operation he'd ever conducted. His mistress took control of what remained and quietly aligned herself with the Seo organization. The message was clear. Threatening Seo Kongjun's wife had consequences. Severe consequences. The years that followed were not always easy. There were threats. New enemies rising to test the boundaries. Old rivalries flaring back to life. There were long nights when Kongjun returned home silent and exhausted, carrying burdens he couldn't share. There were moments when Imani wondered if she'd chosen a life too dangerous to survive. But there were also quiet mornings in their suite at the compound, sunlight streaming through windows while they lay tangled together. There were evenings in the kitchen she'd finally claimed as her own, developing fusion dishes that made her husband close his eyes in pure pleasure. There were phone calls with her mother, now healthy and thriving, and video chats with Adiz, who was flourishing at university. There was love, deep and fierce and absolutely unwavering. On their second anniversary, Kongjun presented her with a restaurant, a small space in Itaewon that he'd purchased in her name, complete with a state-of-the-art kitchen and a staff ready to bring her culinary visions to life. You said you came to Seoul to build something, he told her as she stood in the empty dining room, tears streaming down her face. Build it. Show this city exactly who you are. Who am I? He pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing her temple. "You're Imani Seo, the woman who told me my wine could wait. The woman who reminded me what courage looks like. The woman I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve." She laughed through her tears. "That's a lot to live up to. You've already exceeded it." His arms tightened around her. Every day. In every way. The restaurant opened 3 months later. It became one of the most celebrated fusion establishments in Seoul, Nigerian and Korean flavors blending in ways critics called revolutionary, and Imani called coming home. Years later, they would tell the story differently. Some versions focused on the scandal, the Nigerian waitress who'd captured Seoul's most dangerous man. Some emphasized the romance, the love story that had survived threats and separations and everything the world had thrown at it. But the version Imani loved best was simpler. A woman had seen someone who needed help. She had chosen to help them regardless of the cost. And that single choice had changed everything. Not just for her, for him too, for both of them. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of courage create the biggest ripples. Sometimes, standing up for what's right opens doors you never knew existed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most unexpected response is the beginning of the greatest love story you'll ever live. In their bedroom at the compound late at night, Imani would trace the tattoo at her husband's wrist and remember the woman she'd been before. Exhausted, struggling, sending money home while barely surviving herself. That woman had been brave. But this woman, Imani Seo, wife of the most powerful man in Seoul, chef and business owner and beloved daughter whose family wanted for nothing, this woman was something more. She was exactly who she'd always been. Just with someone finally standing beside her. "What are you thinking?" Kong Jun murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about wine." He laughed, that rare, precious sound she'd learned to coax from him. "Wine. I'm thinking about what would have happened if I'd brought you that bottle instead of helping Mrs. Park. His arms tightened around her. "Then I suppose we'd both still be alone. And miserable." "And miserable," he agreed. "Lucky for us both, you're incapable of doing the convenient thing." "Lucky for us both," she echoed. "You're secretly capable of recognizing that." He pressed a kiss to her hair. She settled deeper into his arms. Outside, Seoul glittered in the darkness. A city of lights, a city of secrets, a city where a Nigerian waitress had faced down the most dangerous man anyone had ever met and won something neither of them had been looking for. Love. Unexpected. Undeniable. Oh. Viva. Thank you for watching this story of courage, love, and the unexpected connections that change our lives. If you enjoyed this journey with Imani and Kongjun, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional cinematic stories. Your support means everything. Until next time.